Uh, Moving on to the main event, what would you take of Phil Davis's performance, and who do you think they should put in front of him next?
Well, I think he was impressive in some ways and not as impressive in others. I guess Rogerio had surprisingly improved takedown defense, especially early on. I expected Davis to have a much easier time taking him down, especially given his wrestling pedigree. But at the same time, if you look at Davis's previous fights, you look at the Tim Boach fight, he had double underhooks for ages and he couldn't take him down. That's not to say that his wrestling is, not as good as we thought, but maybe it hasn't yet adapted to MMA the way you'd expect, and we've seen that happen to many wrestlers. But I was actually impressed with the way he made adjustments on the fly. He was having a hard time double-legging Rogerio in the first round, but then he switched into single legs. He took him down, and Rogerio was still good on the ground. Obviously, Phil Davis was never going to dummy on him on the ground or land any significant punishment or even submit him, which is an area where Davis has shown to have improved very much in his last fights. His submissions, he was never going to submit to Rogerio, I don't think. As far as his next bout is concerned, I really hope they take it slow on him, similar to the way they did to John Jones after he beat Brandon Vera, where they just gave him Vladimir Matyushenko, and a lot of people thought, oh, that's a step down, but I really hope that's what they do with Davis, because he still needs the ring time, the cage time, and he's still pretty raw, and he's virtually a rookie in the sport. So maybe the winner of Jason Brills, of Vladimir Matyushenko, that would be a good fight. If they totally insist on giving him a higher name, Rich Franklin, maybe, or Forrest Griffin.
Win or lose with Matt Hamill, do you think that would still be a good fight for him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. On one hand, you've got a wrestler in Hamill who could trouble Davis. I don't think he'd win that fight, Hamill, that is. I think that's a good fight for Davis, but at least his wrestling will be tested. We'll see how good it actually is, because Hamill is also a good wrestler himself. If Hamill beats Rampage Jackson or loses to Rampage Jackson, yeah, that's a fight I'd like to see for sure.
And also, one more question about that main event. How would you rank, how would you rate Phil Davis's stand-up?
Yeah, that's the one thing I was kind of disappointed in, because, yeah, he hasn't been training for a long time, but the good thing with Davis is that he's been pretty active, which is what you'd hope for in a prospect. Compare that to somebody like King Mo Lawal, who's been injured, who hasn't had as many fights in Strikeforce as you'd like. And that's the good thing. He's had many fights, but because of that, you kind of wish if he, took more time to improve his striking the way John Jones did, for example. And, yeah, you just don't see that. I thought he looked kind of uncomfortable on the feet. The way he was throwing those kicks, those right kicks, whether it was to the leg or to the head, he looked very uncomfortable. The way he closed the distance to do them, it left him open for counters. Somebody like maybe a Rampage Jackson would have totally taken advantage of that, or Machida for that matter. Not that he should face these guys anytime soon, but yeah, his striking is pretty deficient.
And on the flip side, where does Lona go from here?
If they absolutely want to make that fight, maybe a rematch with Shogun, that would be good. Unless they decide to go with Shogun against Forrest Griffin too. Otherwise, I'm hoping they don't give him a wrestler, because that's like the third wrestler he's faced in a row after Jason Brills and who else? Who did he face?
Ryan Bader.
Ryan Bader, exactly. Yeah, so I'm kind of hoping he gets a break from that. Maybe, somebody like, I don't know, Thiago Silva, if he gets his whole steroid thing cleared up, that would be a good fight. I'd like to see that. Rogerio is still a serviceable fighter in that division. He's never been blown away. I don't think he deserves to beat Brills, so on some level he's kind of like, he should have lost his last 3 fights, but he's been, I don't know, he was never blown away by any means.
Yeah, it seems like he's been having a tough time with wrestlers, and like you said, the past 3 fights, all wrestlers, and they've all been giving him a lot of problems. All right, we just want to switch up for a little bit and go to last week, UFC 128. Just a few fights that we want to talk about with you and get your perspective. The Barboza and Njokuani fight. How did you score that? And did you Ariel Helwani actually has a fight scored for Njokuani. How did you have it?
No, I had it exactly the way the judges had it, which is 29-28 Barboza, although I expected him to be far more dominant with his performance.
What would you give the third round to? A lot of people are giving it to Njokuani, a lot of people are giving it to Barboza.
Well, I'm kind of partial to 10-10 rounds. I know the judges hardly ever score them.
Yep.
So if it were up to me, I'd score it like that. But, which would make the fight a draw, and that pisses everybody off. But if I was a judge, yeah, I think I would have went with Barboza.
All right, that sounds good. So Nate Marquardt, he actually talked about moving down to welterweight. If he actually does that, do you think he'd be successful at that division?
If he can make weight without cutting a leg, then maybe. But that shocked me when I heard that. I mean, Marquardt is ripped. He's huge. You look at his upper body, even his legs. The guy is huge. If he can go to welterweight, first of all, he'd be a breath of fresh air because that division is kind of filled with wrestlers. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you want a guy who can sprawl and brawl, who has the power, who has the striking. I think he could give a guy like John Fitch trouble. I think he could give even somebody like Josh Koscheck. I know he would never fight GSP, or at least that's what they say. But I really have my doubts whether he can make the weight. That's the issue for me.
Speaking about GSP, do you think GSP moving up in weight has anything to do with this decision by him? Like GSP potentially moving up in weight?
Yeah, I'm sure that was on his mind. The last thing Team Jackson needs is additional drama. Even though GSP doesn't train as much as guys like Rashad and John Jones did. I mean, GSP does most of his training in the TriStar gym with Firas Zahabi in Montreal, but he still goes to Albuquerque occasionally. And yeah, I'm sure they both made it pretty clear that they wouldn't fight, but who knows? But yeah, I think if GSP wins his next fight and decides to move up, which I really doubt. I think they're gonna lobby for a catch weight with Anderson. But if that happens and he decides to move up, then yeah, I think it would make the decision far easier on Marquardt to move down. And if he could actually make the weight in a healthy manner, then he'd actually have a nice chance of actually capturing the title.
All right, another great fighter that we had on that card, Jim Miller. He seems to be in like a huge pawn in this lightweight division. He's got Anthony Pettis, Clay Guida, the two fighters fighting the championship fight next month. In 2 months. And even Dennis Seaver is coming up the ranks right now, even though he has a fight against Matt Wyman, which I have no idea why. Where do you see Jim Miller fitting in this lightweight picture?
Well, I mean, if they just decide to give him a title shot right away, I would be more than fine with that. I think he's earned it. I think he's been very impressive. The thing is, if Anthony Pettis beats Clay Guida, he deserved the shot. He was supposed to be the one who would get the next shot after the previous Maynard-Edgar fight, but, that turned out to be a draw. They decided to go for a rubber match. And if Guida beats Pettis, then yeah, it's between Jim Miller and Clay Guida. Otherwise, I think it's Pettis. The thing is, I'm not sure whether Miller would be willing to sit out and just wait, because those fights, as you mentioned, are still like a couple of months away. Yeah. So does he want to wait and risk not getting the title shot, or does he just want to be active? I mean, he's already made it clear that he'd fight anytime, anywhere, anybody basically, and I'm sure he would. So does he want to sit out or not? That's my question. I was kind of surprised they decided to give Dennis Seaver. They mashed him up with
Matt Wyman.
The name. Yeah, exactly. As you just mentioned, Matt Wyman. That's a very weird fight, as you just said. I thought a fight between Miller and Seaver could have served as a title eliminator, or at least Miller against Melvin Goulart, who also had a decent, or more than decent, actually, very impressive performance against Evan Dunham. So I think they should have at least put him in a title eliminator scenario. But it could be because they just want to keep their options open, and they don't want to get rid of any contenders by having them fight one another. But I definitely would have at least given Seaver somebody like Miller and just wait to see what happens, and then just go with the winner of Guida and Pettis for the next shot.
Do you have anybody in mind right now for who Jim Miller could face? Anybody at all?
Yeah, that's tough because a lot of guys aren't available right now, and they're signed up for fights, which kind of makes this whole situation a bit complicated. But there's never any shortage of guys in that division. It's so deep. But yeah, now that you mention it, I really can't think of anybody who's worthy, or at least not worthy, but who's on Jim Miller's level at this point in time. I really don't see it.
How do you feel about Shirk fighting Jim Miller next?
Yeah, that would be an appropriate fight. I mean, Shirk is coming off a win, if you could call it that, because I don't think he won that fight. But yeah, Shirk against Miller, I guess, given given the circumstances and given that, as we just said, that there isn't anybody available, Shirk will be a good fight. Yeah, I think he beats Shirk too, which would make things better because it will give him probably the biggest win of his career, just in terms of name value, and probably cement his status as a #1 contender.